6 in the morning. While the rest of the street is still asleep, one garage light is already on. A young man steps outside, not to head for a job, not to chase a workout. He walks into that garage to spend his whole Saturday with a car that already runs perfectly. He bolts on parts that cost more than a month's rent for some people. His friends roll their eyes, his parents call it a waste, but in his mind, none of it is optional. Every part is necessary. This isn't really a story about cars. It's a story about something buried much deeper in us. The bond between a person and a machine they've rebuilt with their own hands runs on layers most of us never notice. Lowering a suspension, swapping an exhaust, rewriting the code inside an engine's brain, none of that is just metalwork. It's a language, a way of saying who you are without speaking a word. Think about it for a second. A car is one of the rare things a person doesn't just own, they live inside it. It's not sitting on a shelf somewhere. People spend hours in that seat every single day, sometimes more hours than they spend in their own bed. So when someone starts changing that car, piece by piece, they're really redesigning a room they live in, the same way someone repaints a bedroom or picks out an outfit. Except this room isn't standing still. It rolls through the world, carrying a message to every stranger who looks its way. Psychologists who study consumer behavior have found something interesting. People grow attached to objects that reflect who they wish they were, not who they currently are. A car becomes a mirror pointed at the future. A 23-year-old stuck in an entry-level job might be driving a Honda Civic packed with a turbo and stripped-down racing seats. That car has nothing to do with his paycheck. It has everything to do with his ambition. Speed, power, a version of himself that hasn't arrived yet, but that he can already feel behind the wheel. There's a man named Marcus from Toronto who picked up a wrench at 19 and worked 2 jobs just to keep buying parts for his Subaru WRX. When someone finally asked him why he was pouring money he barely had into a car, his answer said more than he probably meant it to. He grew up moving constantly, chasing his father's job from city to city, 7 different homes before he even turned 18. No friend group ever had time to become real. But the car stayed. Every bolt he turned was a decision that belonged to him alone, a mark he left behind, one small piece of steadiness in a childhood that never held still. And that reveals something important: the need for control. In a world where so much feels completely out of our hands, a car can become the one territory where a person rules absolutely. The color, the sound, the way it hugs the road. Nobody gets a vote but them. It's a tiny kingdom, and they are the only ones sitting on the throne. There's another need hiding underneath all of this: the need to belong. Walk into a car meet on any Saturday night and you'll feel it instantly. These aren't just people parking vehicles side by side to be admired. They're people who have finally found their tribe. Someone who drops $30,000 into a Nissan 350Z might sound reckless to a stranger walking by, but inside that circle, he's respected, understood. They all speak the same dialect, built out of horsepower figures, torque curves, and paint codes. Abraham Maslow once placed belonging near the very base of human need, right above safety and shelter. For a lot of young enthusiasts still figuring out where they fit, this community hands them exactly that. Shared passion, shared knowledge, friendships built on something they actually care about. There's a creative force at work here too, one that rarely gets credit. Modifying a car is an art form, plain and simple. Every choice of parts, colors, stance, it's the same decision-making process any sculptor or painter goes through.
Someone takes a factory product built to look like 1,000 others and pulls something entirely their own out of it, a picture from their imagination set down in the real world. And when that vision is finally finished, the brain lights up exactly the way it does for any artist completing a piece. Neuroscience backs this up. Finishing something you poured real effort into triggers a rush of dopamine, the chemical tied to pleasure and reward. Bolt on a new exhaust, finish a full respray. That hit is real, the same wave a painter feels stepping back from a finished canvas. But there's a shadow side to this story too. Not every modification comes from a healthy, joyful place. Sometimes it grows out of something heavier, insecurity, or a need to prove something, maybe to others, maybe only to yourself. Psychologists have a name for it: compensatory consumption. Buying or building to fill a gap that has nothing to do with cars at all. A researcher at a university in Britain sat down with modified car owners and asked them why. A striking number admitted they felt invisible somewhere else in their lives, overlooked at work, underestimated at home. The screaming exhaust, the aggressive body kit, the stance dropped low enough to scrape a speed bump. For some, these weren't upgrades, they were a demand for attention they weren't getting anywhere else. The car turned into proof, into validation. That doesn't mean every enthusiast is secretly hurting. That would be unfair, and it would be wrong. But it's worth sitting with this for a moment. Motivation lives on a spectrum. Some of it is pure joy. Some of it is quiet pain nobody's ever said out loud. There's also the pursuit of mastery. Humans are wired to chase skill, to chase competence. Plenty of these builders don't just order parts and hand them to a shop. They learn to do the work themselves. Late nights on forums, hours of tutorials, mistake after mistake, slowly turning into real expertise. That climb from knowing nothing to knowing everything under the hood delivers a satisfaction that's hard to fake. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi described something called flow, a state where a person becomes so absorbed in a task that time seems to disappear. Car enthusiasts describe this constantly, hunched over an engine bay, completely lost in it. The challenge sits right in that sweet spot, never too easy, never impossible. There's a father and son in Melbourne who spent 2 full years bringing a 1990s Toyota Supra back to life together. The father later said those hours in the garage held the most honest conversations they ever had.
While bleeding brake lines or adjusting a coilover, they talked about everything: life, fear, love. The car became more than a car. It became the excuse 2 people needed to finally talk to each other. This kind of connection spreads far beyond one family. Modified car culture builds entire worlds around itself. Meetups, road trips, shared rituals. People drive for hours just to stand in a parking lot with strangers who speak the same language, trading compliments, asking about setups, admiring the work. These gatherings quietly fill a hole that modern life keeps leaving open. We live through screens now. Old communities have thinned out. And here, in a parking lot full of loud engines, something ancient gets restored. People standing face to face, sharing something real. We evolved to live in tight little communities. When modern life stops offering that, people go looking for it wherever they can find it. There's rebellion woven through all of this too. Every society hands down rules about how things should look, how loud they should be, how low they should sit. Modified cars break almost all of them on purpose. Too loud, too low, too aggressive to be called practical. That's not an accident. It's a quiet defiance, a way of saying, without saying it out loud, that the rulebook doesn't fully apply to them. For younger builders especially, this rebellion does real psychological work. It carves out an identity separate from parents, separate from what society expects.
And it's a safe kind of rebellion. Nobody gets hurt. But the feeling of claiming your own autonomy, that part is completely real. Then there's the money. People spend cash they don't actually have on modifications they don't technically need. On paper, none of it adds up. But humans were never purely logical creatures. We're driven by feeling as much as arithmetic. That new turbo might make zero financial sense, but the pride it brings them is worth more to them than the number on the receipt. So what does all of this really tell us? Strip away the car, and you're left staring at something universal. We all want to express who we are. We all want somewhere we belong. We all crave a little control in a world that rarely gives us any. We all want to get good at something and feel it in our bones. The person pouring their savings into a car isn't wired any differently from anyone else. They just found their outlet. For some people, it's painting. For some, it's music. For some, it's a sport they've chased since childhood. For this person, it's the machine sitting in the garage. So the next time you see a heavily modified car and think it looks over the top or pointless, pause for a second. There's a person behind that build. A story being told through steel and paint, a set of needs quietly being met, an identity being spoken out loud in the only language they know how to use. That car was never just transportation. It's therapy, it's art, it's community, it's identity. All of it folded into one machine that finally moves.